Welcome to another Pro Video Coalition NAB at Home 2020 video where we're talking to Robert Kruger of Lesspain Software. Again, none of us is at NAB. We're not in Vegas, so we are at our homes doing NAB this year, talking to vendors, product makers, and thought leaders about what's going on in our media production space. So, Lesspain Software makes a great product. It's a Kyno or Kyno? What's correct, Robert?
Actually, both are correct. I mean, we started out saying Kyno because we expected everyone in the US to pronounce it Kyno. So for us, it's actually Kyno, although the name the idea of the name came from the German word for cinema, which is Kyno, K-I-N-O. And our designer just thought the Y would make it look much cooler, and that's how it
Gotcha. Well, I was calling it Kyno forever, and then I think I heard possibly you in an interview pronounce it Kyno, but I kind of like personally Kyno, but whatever, do whatever. For those who don't know, Kyno is I'm going to say this here, and this is my thoughts on it in a sentence. It is one of the single most useful video and media all-around tools for everything that you can download as a piece of software onto your Mac or Windows machine. How's that? If you're working in editing, if you're working in production where you need to play back media or transcode media, it's like a one-stop shop for, everything except actually editing and mixing. But as far as playing back and looking at footage and tagging footage and putting metadata in and transcoding, there's just so much that it can do. But rather than me sort of talk about it, Robert, what is your elevator pitch when someone says, "Hey, what does Kyno do?"
Well, you stole like 90% of it.
Thank you.
With your description, which was perfect. I mean, the only thing that I could basically add is as a differentiator is that it is a tool that is really easy to use, so that it's not just like your DIT tech-minded people kind of tool, but it's also something that directors or producers or assistants, editorial staff can work with just without any long introduction. People just pick it up and perceive it as much easier to use than comparable tools in the industry.
One thing that I'll also add about Kyno is that I like to sometimes call it's almost like a replacement of the Mac Finder or the Windows Explorer when looking at video files or even audio files or even still image files, I guess, because you don't need to open up a QuickTime player or whatever it is on Windows to take a quick look at your media. You can do it all through Kyno in a much faster, much more efficient, and a much more fun way. So that's one way I describe it sometimes, as a replacement for the Finder or Explorer for when dealing with video and audio files. I'm not sure if that's like, what your thought process was when you created it, but that's how I use it.
And that's how many people have described it to us. So you're not alone in seeing it this way.
Well, Robert, do you want to let's do a little bit of a screen share and give us kind of a demo and walk us through the product for people who aren't familiar with it. And I'll probably interrupt you a number of times asking questions.
Sure.
And no one better to describe the product than the creator of the product itself.
Okay, although that's not always true.
Well,
I'll try to.
That's why I'm going to interrupt and ask questions.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful that you're here for that. Well, first of all, when you open Kyno, if you've used something like Finder or Windows File Explorer, you feel already familiar with the user interface because, as you say, it's basically a file browser specialized on anything that has to do with media. And as in every file browser, you can just see all your drives here, which could be removable drives, network drives, whatever. And it gives you essentially what a normal file browser gives you, but it only displays media files. It also shows you an integrated player that supports essentially any relevant format out there on the market. So one thing is you won't see your Word or Excel files, so just a view on your media files. But apart from that, it behaves like a normal file browser with a typical copy, paste, and all those functions. But if you double click a file, you're immediately in a player with the rich feature set that you would normally just see in an NLE. So it's way superior to something like VLC or similar single player products. It supports a format range that's much broader than typical players.
So Robert, when you say supports media files and formats and stuff, I'm guessing as far as codecs and different wrappers, is there anything that it doesn't support? That's probably easier than telling us what all it does support, because I found it supports most everything that I've thrown at it to look at.
Yeah, I think the few blind spots that we have, the most notable ones are some professional RAW formats like ARRI RAW, which is coming soon. We don't support Sony RAW and Canon RAW yet.
Gotcha.
But so all the broadcast formats, XDCAM, XAVC, all H.264, H.265, anything that comes out of regular cameras and regular low to mid-range or even professional studio cameras is usually supported by Kyno.
As well as audio files and I guess image files. I mentioned that in our
Yes.
open, but I think it supports image files too, right?
Yes, it does, and I'll show that a bit later. So this is the basic functionality if you just use it as a file browser, but really its power, the first time that people usually take note when they test it is when they discover what we call the drill down function.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's simple, but like so useful.
Yeah, the problem that it solves is one that we really see everyone has. I mean, this is a typical production drive here with a projects folder, and each project has tons of subfolders. And even, honestly, in our industry, I don't think very many people are super disciplined. But even if you're disciplined, you still end up with typically hundreds of folders or even thousands of folders on a typical production drive. And what Kyno's drill down function gives you is you can flatten the folder structure, or obviously you don't modify the folder structure, but you get a flattened view of the folder structure. So you can now browse through the folder structure. You can drill down on parts of the folder structure. So you see the blue background here that shows you which part of the folder structure you're actually looking at. Now, these are all the subfolders in the footage folder, so it ignores all the camera subfolders that are usually very annoying when using something like Finder or Windows Explorer. And this gets really powerful when you combine it with filtering. I mean, up here you have those quick filters, like for example, the typical media types. I just want to restrict it to image files. So you see we have lots of these photos and screen grabs. And if I restrict it to just audio, we don't have just audio files in here, video. But there are some filters up here that are actually rather simple, but super useful in practical situations. Like, for example, I always use these last 24 hours or last 2 days, 7 days, because I tend to know when I did something. When I'm in the middle of a project, I know, I just produced this asset like 2 days ago, but I don't know exactly where it was. So I drill down the folder and then filter by, say, last 2 days or last 7 days, and then I usually see it right here. But that's sort of the simple approach, but you can make this much more powerful. For example, using this text-based filter up here, I can use text like drone, which matches anything that is remotely a text. Could be a file name, could be a marker, a description, a tag, anything that's in the file. And I can combine this with Boolean expressions, like for example, drone and car. And this is pretty neat because I just restricted those, I just narrowed it down to 22 files out of, what was it before? 769. So that's really powerful. If you combine that with the other metadata that you can use, for example, I'm looking for stock footage and I know it's got to be 4K, and I'm looking for stuff for example, 4K drone footage. Okay, now it's 46 items. And well, you get the concept. You can combine it with everything that Kyno knows, like ratings, anything that has at least a 2-star rating, or anything that is tagged as, and then I can select from the tags that I've used. Like sports, I doubt that we'll find anything with these criteria.
So let me ask you a quick question here. You're going to tags and ratings. Those are star ratings and things like that you have done within Kyno by tagging the footage and going through and adding metadata yourself using Kyno itself, right?
That's exactly right. That's like the second function that I was going to show you. If you go into the detail view of any asset, there you can see a metadata tab that lets you enter which is sort of the most common subset of all metadata standards that you have across NLEs or the common MAMs. And you can input these metadata fields right here and step through the files one by one, using the arrow keys, for example. Or if you know, for example, okay, this stuff is all from the same, let's say this stuff is all from the same location, and I could select those files here and use the edit multiple dialog, for example, and edit stuff like scene or tags for multiple of these. So we have invested a lot of effort to make batch operations super efficient with keyboard shortcuts and all these batch editing possibilities. I can just batch tag something here. I can batch apply ratings, or that I can do with a keyboard shortcut as well, for example.
And let me stop you for a second there. I want to just reiterate to people watching this how useful that can be. For example, go to the list view. We've seen icon view, we've seen the detail view, but there's a full-on list view that's very similar to you're looking at a list view in your NLE bin where you get all the metadata that's already intrinsic to the file, but stuff that you assigned as well. But I just want to imagine that you are working a shoot and you, instead of having to give the producer or maybe an assistant a licensed copy of Avid or Premiere or Final Cut, for example, they could jump into Kyno and get a lot of that same tagging and metadata functionality and could go to work prepping a lot of that footage and doing a lot of that tagging and ratings and things like that, which then Kyno can transfer to pretty much all the NLEs, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Absolutely right. And I mean, that's what many of our users use it for. Because the nice thing about Kyno is the way we store metadata. So we store it in a way that is totally, it doesn't mess with the files themselves. We don't write any metadata into the files. We write metadata into hidden files, or rather hidden folders in the same folder structure. So you can give someone your camera card, or can give someone the offload drive and have them do the logging in Kyno, and then they give you back the drive, or they put the files on Dropbox or whatever, and you get all the metadata automatically with those files, and can then transfer the metadata into the different NLEs. I mean, I'm going to demo that a little later anyway, but the big differentiator here, or one big advantage, is that the metadata that you have logged early in the process is usable in Final Cut Pro, in Premiere Pro, in Resolve, and in Media Composer.
So that's the big four. I don't know,
Yeah.
I mean, there are others, but that's definitely ones you want to. For example, like go under the metadata menu there. It's in your at the top of the menu items. Is there I'd like to give people an idea of exactly what the different things are that you can do. I think the ratings is one that people who come in from Final Cut 10, that's built into Final Cut 10, but you can actually use ratings in Kyno and get that data back to Premiere Pro, because Premiere Pro has a starred metadata field that many people don't even know exists. That
exactly.
Which is kind of cool.
So down here we have the markers, and up here we have something that we call subclips in Kyno, and that is essentially a marker with a duration.
Okay.
And that is very useful for logging footage if you want to make the editor's job a lot easier, and especially in situations where you have someone on location who knows what happened, and then at some point in the process they hand over the footage to someone else, and the guy in the edit wasn't on location and doesn't really know what happened where. And doing the logging early in the process really saves you a lot of time, because you don't lose that information, and it doesn't have to be recreated by someone going through all the footage.
Let me ask you a question about that. Depending on your NLE that you're transferring to, some NLEs have duration markers with durations or extended markers, where some of them don't. Do you have the option of sending a marker duration back versus sending a true and actual subclip back to the NLE, or is it dependent on the NLE? What kind of support?
Yes, that was a great question. That was like I had scripted it. I'll show you the option in just a second when we send this to Premiere Pro.
Okay.
Yes, we do. The answer is yes, we do. And the thing is that we translate the metadata to the format that comes, or to the things that come closest to what the NLE would use for that. For example, as you said, in Premiere Pro, we have markers with duration. The same we have in Resolve. In Avid, we don't have markers with duration, at least we cannot transfer them, but they have subclips. Mm-hmm. So you have the option of exporting them as subclips. In Premiere Pro, actually, you have both. You have markers with the duration and you have subclips. Okay. So you have both options in Kyno. And in Final Cut, it gets even more complicated because you have range-based keywords, which you could map this to. But then there's sort of a religious war between people preferring range-based favorites over range-based favorites with the comment over keywords with a range, or range-based keywords. Mm-hmm. So we support both. Okay,
imagine that, a religious war over what editing application one thinks is better. I've never heard of such.
Yeah, but even among Final Cut users, between the fractions who say on one side you should use, for something like this, you should use range-based keywords, and others say you should use favorite with a comment.
Wow, that's pretty granular as far as the the bitching and moaning amongst which marker and tagging system to use.
Yeah, all right. So if we take the entire rush and want to send this to Premiere Pro, what we do is we select the Send To menu, and we send, this is only displayed if you have all three of those installed.
So it will see what's on your system and be able to adapt to what you've got on your system? Exactly. Okay.
So if you just had Premiere Pro 2019 installed and none of the others, and no Frame.io connection configured, then this would be Premiere Pro only.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'll send it here, and this is the thing that we just talked about. So you have the option to translate those subclips into markers with a duration. And you can do both. You can create subclips in a project. So this is the option that you have during your transition into Premiere Pro. You usually don't select this on a per project basis. I think most people just have a personal preference, and what they usually do is the only thing they usually do is maybe they specify bin. But apart from that, for example, when I work with this workflow in Final Cut Pro, which I do more than Premiere, then I usually just use the shortcut and hit OK. So it's a super fast workflow.
Gotcha. Well, I've noticed that a number of things in Kyno, that once you set it up the first time, you got get whatever specs or whatever metadata and whatever format you want, and then it remembers that, and you can also subsequently do stuff really, really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally love this concept of not, I mean, in some cases, something like presets make more sense, but for those lightweight things, it's so easy just to keep the state from the last time you used it. And for many, it's surprising for how many workflows this is a really, really good approximation of what you want.
So there's Premiere. There's the elusive star ratings that, again, I don't think many people know even exists. Perhaps I haven't done a good job educating the public that they're there.
Yeah, I mean, Premiere Pro is a beast of a program with a lot of stuff, but you have to know where to find it. So you would have to configure those metadata fields to be there. Mm-hmm. But it's not that hard. So here it is, basic rating.
Yep.
And I mean, it's pretty powerful. You have the tags, USA, Desert, Mexico, Sea. All that stuff is in here. The titles that I entered in Kyno are here as clip name. And here you see the range-based markers, or rather the markers with duration.
Yep, very nice.
With a comment.
And then once you're in Premiere, in that case, with all those keywords tagged, you could use search bins to be able to sort of automatically filter and automatically gather a lot of that stuff into bins if you had thousands and thousands of clips. Is there any, have you seen Kyno, the exchange with other NLEs? If you are working with, what we've got, 6 clips there, 7 clips. If you've got hundreds and thousands of clips, does it slow the things down a lot, or is it still pretty robust?
I think the Kyno side is pretty robust. My personal experience with Premiere Pro has been that with a large number of clips in one, the underlying mechanism is XML for the transfer. Okay. And an import of a huge XML document is rather slow in Premiere Pro. Yeah. So if you transfer hundreds of files in one go, then you might have to go and make a cup of coffee and come back. Right. I don't know, but that's I really in my projects I haven't run into that as a practical problem, but sometimes I get the impression that this could take a while when you have too many files. Yeah, I've used it on several corporate projects, and it's been pretty fast. But I probably haven't used it on, say, a large documentary where I'm saying, all right, take these multi-thousand files and send them over at once. Obviously, I work with Kyno on my editing projects, and those are smaller projects, so it might be totally different and a big documentary production. But anyway, what I do is I send it in several batches, because when I start, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to use. And then when I make up my mind that I need something more from, another shoot, then I go back to the footage and do the searching within Kyno, because for me it's much more efficient to find my stuff in Kyno rather than my personal opinion is Final Cut Pro does the best job as far as media management is concerned. So if you want to find stuff in an NLE, my favorite is Final Cut, but still I feel more comfortable with drill down and finding stuff in Kyno than doing the media management side. Sure. Inside the NLE. You mentioned coming back to Kyno after you've been to the NLE. If you get back into Kyno and you start changing metadata or changing ratings and stuff, is there any mechanism to update what you've already sent over to the NLE, or is it would it just sort of overwrite the metadata if you change it in Kyno and resent it back? That's totally different from NLE to NLE. With Final Cut Pro, I think there is no way of exchanging metadata with a subsequent import of the same clips without overwriting the metadata that you have entered in the editing software. Right. I wouldn't think so. I know that, for example, we got feedback. 1.8 is launching in about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it's the first version with the full Resolve integration, which we got a lot of demand for. And the feedback we got from the Resolve users who are in the private beta program, is that it actually works really well updating metadata in Resolve by just sending the material once again.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how well it works in Premiere Pro, I have to admit. Final Cut Pro, I think it's just that limitation that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's probably an outlier case. It wouldn't happen very often, but I just thought of it as you mentioned, coming back to Kyno to do some sorting and stuff, because I think that's a thing I like to point out to viewers is that you can you have a batch of clips right there in the Kyno window. Talking about using it as a finder replacement, you can drag clips from Kyno right into the NLE. It's just a way to say, oh, there's that clip I wanted. I need it in the timeline, or I need it to get it in quickly. If you don't want to go through the process of the metadata tagging and the exporting, it can. I don't know if it's that's meant to be a supported workflow, but I've used it that way quite a few times.
Absolutely.
When I find it, drag it from Kyno right into Final Cut or Premiere, and there it is. So it's almost like a bin replacement in a sense.
Yeah, and with Final Cut, all the metadata travels as well. We have a custom drag and drop operation implemented. So you don't lose any metadata if you drag and drop from Kyno to Final Cut 10.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a few questions now that you're in the interface there. Go back to the list view for a second, if you don't mind. And there are lots of metadata columns. Is there, how many are available to folks? Is there, there's quite a few there. So it's a lot of the same stuff you would expect in your NLE, but I think with your scene and shot and things like that is a place where you could, again, do a lot of organizing of the footage before it ever hits your NLE.
Yeah, that's one of the favorite features of people using Kyno and QC. We have a lot of users in production companies or at broadcasters who use Kyno as the primary tool to look at incoming footage in their ingest, how do you call that? Like ingest departments, ingest stations, whatever.
Is there if you turn columns on and off, is there a mechanism to save what you've got, what columns you have turned on in the list view, or to have different saved column views?
You are asking the right and painful questions. No, we haven't implemented that yet. That's on the roadmap, definitely.
Gotcha.
It makes so much sense. I mean, right now we store the columns that you've configured, so next time you fire up Kyno, those are still the same. Mm-hmm. But there's some I'm not going to explain the logic because it's somewhat non-obvious. I think it remains the same in the workspace and the devices section, or there are some things that are a bit misleading or non-obvious for users, and we want to replace it by something where people can just do exactly what you just described.
Gotcha.
Save them as a preset, and then you can load like a preset for QC or a preset for logging.
That makes sense. Hit the go to the convert menu, because Kyno is also a transcoding application as well as a viewing and browsing application, and there are a lot of formats that it can transcode to.
Yep, that's exactly where I wanted to go. The basic operation in Kyno is almost always the same. You browse somewhere, you optionally filter, and then you select a bunch of clips and do something on this selection. And that could be conversion, that could be sending to an NLE. So it's most of it is context menu driven, as the send to an NLE functions and the conversion as well. Here you have the presets that I used last, and then you have different categories.
And there's really a lot of stuff under there.
Yeah. I mean, we focused on the stuff that's most relevant for anything between camera and edit, because that's really the sweet spot of Kyno. I think the transcoder is definitely the batch transcoder that, in my opinion, my biased opinion, obviously, it has the best balance between being easy to use and being still powerful enough. We built it for the purpose of batch operations being fast and easy to use, and that's mostly for the use case between camera and edit.
I see experimental. Is that just in the beta version? I don't think I've ever noticed that before.
Oh, I think I'm running on a development version.
Okay. I was like, whoa, experimental sounds cool. There's also the option to rewrap, which I don't think is something that a lot of people don't know this exists or they don't understand this, but a rewrapping feature will just put it into a new wrapper, a new container, if you will, without having to do a full transcode of the file, which can be a very useful thing if you're in a situation where an MP4 won't work. You can often rewrap that to a .mov container, and that's just that's a much faster operation.
And I mean, we haven't even covered subclipping yet, because that's something that's quite unique about Kyno, how we support subclipping of files. If you have a codec that supports this, like for example ProRes, you can export subclips, or you can rewrap just a portion of the file. Let's say you just need 5 seconds from your, I don't know, 30 gig, 10-minute ProRes 4K take. And in Kyno, you just mark in and out and then export that clip, and then you could just use rewrap. This would be like speed of light, because you don't transcode, as you say, you just copy the data into a new wrapper. And if you work with formats like ProRes, that's quite a powerful option.
We'll show that for a second, because that's, you mentioned subclipping. We talked about subclipping into the NLE, but you're talking about a different type of subclipping there.
Yeah, but let me just quickly go through the transcoding
basics,
please. Because I think that's for people who don't know Kyno yet, that's quite an important thing to understand. So if you transcode a batch, the basic operation is pretty simple. You select an output directory, and usually if you select a preset, you don't tweak settings. We do have the option to tweak settings, like applying LUTs or certain filters or overlays like timecode overlay. But usually, most of the times, you just select your output folder and hit start, and then the batch is started and you're done. One thing that's a differentiator from most other transcoding products out there, especially the big ones, is the naming engine that we have in there. So we have a lot of naming presets that are also metadata based that you can choose for your batch, and you can build very complex naming presets as well if you want to really get into that. And you can preview, if you, for example, let's say you use a custom name, an index, Pro Video Coalition PVC, you can see what the result will be in terms of file names, so you don't shoot yourself in the foot. Yeah, the
preview function is huge there, because just that quick look, and it'll tell you, these number of files will be created, and also, and you can show this here in a second, the batch renaming functionality, which can get you in trouble, but if you need it, it can be incredibly useful. But being able to preview before you batch rename something can really save your bacon.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do a number of things here that are also something that you can't do in the major transcoders that we compete with. For example, you can keep the folder structure from the source. For example, if you want to set up a directory structure that looks just like your footage folder, but just contains, for example, proxies or dailies, and you just need this checkbox, and this will recreate the entire folder structure at the destination.
Let me ask you a question about that. If you're coming from a shoot and you have, say, by date, by camera, then by offload number, and then you've got all these weird folder structures before you get down to the actual MXF file, just by selecting it and then leaving that checkbox on, are you saying at the destination you're sending the transcode, it would automatically build that stack of folders that mirrors, say, your drive that came off the set?
That's exactly right.
That's handy.
Yeah, that's a game changer. I mean, for many workflows, and people don't imagine this as a possibility if they haven't worked with Kyno.
Well, that would come in incredibly helpful when you're conforming. Say you're making proxy files, you go back to conform the high-res version. I can just imagine that would save some headaches there.
Absolutely. I'm working on preparing a video comparing those transcoding workflows between Kyno, Resolve, and Media Encoder. And imagine these things if you really want to have the structure intact and have a naming pattern and all that. I mean, this is the part where we really invested a lot of effort. And I mean, we've got 4 years of practitioners back in there, and we listened to people. So these things really make it possible to have huge batch transcoding jobs that do pretty complex things just in one batch operation. And you can save your own presets that contain all your custom settings for a project. And this is definitely one of the features that you should look at when you do a trial of Kyno, because in a typical production project, using this wisely can save you can easily save you hours per project, and that already pays for the price.
No, absolutely. Cancel out of that for a second and right-click those clips and show the batch renaming function, because I used that on a recent job that was it really saved us a ton of time. But it's, I guess you have the similar naming abilities that you do in the transcode.
Exactly. It's always, I mean, that's the nice thing. This is always the same engine, so it doesn't make a difference whether you do a batch rename or you do a transcode or you do a batch export of markers to still frames. That's also something that's
cool.
That's good. That gets overlooked often. That can be a game changer if you do social media. For example, one of the presidential candidates' campaigns used it extensively for that purpose.
Are you endorsing somebody?
Oh, hell no. I'm not getting into that. Not on camera.
It's probably best. And that also, you also have the show preview option in the batch rename, which I think is probably more important almost in the transcoding, because that's a place where you can know exactly if you want to rename a camera original file, which is really a no-no, but yet can be useful sometimes. It's very important to know exactly what you're about to do.
Yeah, and I mean, the cool thing about the rename that not many people know, sometimes, I mean, there are trivial renames and there are sometimes really life-saving renames. If someone has screwed up a naming convention and you have to replace something in existing files, in hundreds of existing files.
Yeah.
Because someone got maybe, I don't know, a name wrong, using athlete names, for example, and file names and stuff like that. And if you have a typo in the athlete name and you have hundreds of files, then you can replace text within the files, and that there in the advanced options there are some more lifesavers in there for the not so common cases. But still, I mean, if this saves you from doing this manually on 200-300 files, that pays for one license alone.
Well, let me ask you a feature request for a second. You know, since there is the batch renaming functionality, could there be a way where you could almost have a revert to original file name, where if you did screw something up, or if you want to do it temporarily for a transcoding purpose, you could have it automatically revert back to those camera original names?
It's definitely doable, and you're not the first person to request that.
I'm not asking that because I screwed something up, I promise, and was wishing for it.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. It's just a bit of effort. We know how to do it, but so far, for 1.8, our feature list was so long already, and it just didn't make the cut. But it makes total sense, and at some point we'll implement it. If you shoot with log footage, then what Kyno can do is give you a real-time preview of LUTs applied. And that, for many people, I mean, having to go into an NLE to look at stuff with the LUT applied, this is so much more efficient.
Yeah.
Kyno, you can also do this, or can make this LUT association in the batch process.
Okay.
And that doesn't change the file, but now that it knows it's Panasonic Vlog, I never have to reconfigure it again. And I can even build intelligent batch transcoding presets where let's go here again, where I configure the preset to apply a LUT, and there's the option as defined in player. And just imagine you have a shoot with Sony cameras, with Panasonic cameras, and ARRI cameras, and each of these cameras has their own log. And if you use this setting as defined in player, you can still have a workflow that just uses one batch operation to create the dailies for all the cameras. Always applying the correct LUTs, because the only thing you do is you go into the rush and apply the respective LUT.
Right. So, Robert, talking about LUTs, can you import a custom LUT that's been created elsewhere?
Yes, absolutely. You can. I mean, by default, we detect the LUTs that are installed with, I think, Premiere and Resolve and Final Cut, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. But you can open this LUT folder and then put any cube LUT in there that you have.
Gotcha. When you're in that, and go back to the detail view again, the big icon view. Down at the bottom, of course, there's a lot of your data, your info about the file, size, what it is, creation dates and whatnot. So I think it almost is like a small media info Mac type application to show you some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
But also right there, there's the convert and the gearbox, and a lot of the stuff you can do with the right click or under the menus is available right there as well. So you've got a lot of granularity as far as how you want to interact with Kyno when you're doing things in and amongst the tool, which I've always thought is really really nice.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, I totally agree. People have different preferences whether they want to use global menus, context menus, or keyboard shortcuts. But I can only advise people to really look at the keyboard shortcuts. By the way, the important ones for the context menu, they're always displayed with the options here.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
It definitely makes sense learning the keyboard shortcuts because it's not that many, and it really makes you faster, especially logging and previewing.
Sure. So 1.8 is the new version that it will be shipping soon, if not shipping by the time people see this. What is some of our any big product new things that are in 1.8 to be excited about?
Yeah, as I already mentioned, the Resolve integration is one major news item for us. Then we have Blackmagic RAW support.
Okay.
That's been much anticipated because the camera are just selling so well.
So, the next question when you mentioned Blackmagic RAW, of course, is ProRes RAW.
Definitely on the roadmap with a very, very high priority. But 1.8 will not have ProRes RAW just yet. We'll have Blackmagic RAW Resolve support. We'll have, for the first time, Avid Media Composer integration. And we have something that I think you might have seen, but I haven't really talked about in the transcoding, which is also a very subtle feature, but it can make a big difference in workflows. We have this skip items that already exist on target. So you can build incremental transcoding workflows.
Well, that's nice.
Imagine that you have a big footage folder with lots of subfolders and you dump more stuff, you offload more stuff into your footage folder, and the only operation that you ever have to do is do a drill down and then do your dailies preset run or your proxy preset run on the entire footage folder, and Kyno just figures out what it needs to transcode and what has already been transcoded.
Sure. Or imagine you had a crash or a power outage as you were doing transcoding of hundreds of thousands of files.
Exactly. That's the second case. I wouldn't have thought of that now, but that's definitely the second case that this really helps with.
Well, so one thing I wanted to mention is you've got Frame.io integration, which you see it on one of your contextual menus, but if you go into the preferences, there's a whole integrations tab under the preferences, which tells me there's probably a lot more that could possibly come under the integration.
There's the Archiveware integration for tape archiving, and there's the Telestream integration for Vantage transcoding.
Is Archiveware, is that LTO?
Yes, they have LTO and they have cloud and disk support.
Okay, gotcha. And so what is the Frame.io integration?
So what Frame.io has been designed for in the beginning was really approval workflows for finished products.
Sure.
Like essentially edits. But now it's becoming more and more of your workflow hub, like your cloud platform where you put media and the editor downloads media or downloads the proxies for the edit. And so it's becoming more and more a hub for raw material as well, or raw footage. And that is where we tap into. So we have a delivery function into Frame.io, and what that does is it allows you to upload the footage, do a transcode, an automatic transcode before the upload. So this could be, for example, red raw footage, and you could have your proxy preset here. Those are the same transcoding presets that you have available in the menu. So let me think. Let me say I want to upload this as porous proxy, for example. Then Kyno would do this before the upload and would make sure the transcode is finished and then do the Frame.io upload. And this Frame.io upload would also ensure that all the Kyno metadata that's compatible with Frame.io metadata, which I think until now is description and markers and subclips, so range-based comments, those will be imported as Frame.io comments. So it's a really fast contribution workflow. Just imagine someone doing on-the-road social media kind of production, and people have their iPhone as their internet connection and just want to upload the stuff that is needed for the next episode of this close to real-time format. And for that story, I forgot the most interesting option, really. You can have Kyno export just the subclips. That's something that we briefly touched earlier.
Okay.
So if you, for example, if you have raw footage and you film like you have a tour stop and you film 2 hours of footage, and you go through the footage in Kyno and select subclips of, say, 10 minutes because you're producing a 3-minute episode or something, then Kyno will take care of exporting those subclips in the format that you want. And so you can basically use your iPhone connection just to upload the stuff that you would never have been able to contribute fast enough to someone if you would just have had to transfer the entire camera file.
Gotcha. So if you log into your account through the preferences, and then whatever you set up there in your deliver to Frame.io option, it's just it's logged in with your credentials, and you tell it to do it, and it hits the internet and does it. Once Kyno does its thing, it uploads it right to Frame, and then that's great. Then you've got people in your account, or you send the link to somebody, and they can grab what it's done. It's pretty clever stuff. I guess we can see possibly more integrations in the future, since that you have that preference. I'm guessing lots of other good stuff to come.
Yeah, there's definitely more to come. There will definitely be more work on the Frame.io platform. We love Frame.io. If NAB hadn't been canceled, we would have been at their booth.
Oh, nice.
And we love the platform, and we love working with those guys, and we definitely want to do more as far as the integration is concerned. And we're also talking with a number of other partners who would be good integration candidates. So you're totally right.
Very nice.
Assuming that there's more coming there.
All right, let me put you on the spot. Last question to put you on the spot. If you can go back to your icon view for a second. I've asked for this a few times, so I'm going to ask you publicly now to make you...
No, I know what's coming.
Final Cut 10 has ruined us when we're in icon view because we want scrubbing, we want skimming, and then Premiere added hover scrubbing, and now Avid has it in the source browser, but not the bins. And I've asked before, I said, man, can we get a skimming hover scrub in that icon view? And you explained to me once, and I may have just let it pass my head because I didn't want to hear it's not possible. It's not as easy as one might think.
I mean, obviously, I cannot say on the record that it's not possible because other people are doing it. It's just not a trivial thing because it really depends on you. You have to do some intelligent caching and preloading kind of stuff that's not totally straightforward. So it is some work to make this work not only with full HD 25p content, but also your 8K stuff. So that doesn't freeze your machine once you hover over your clip.
Sure.
So that's essentially the technical problem.
All right.
If we had the guarantee that people only use certain formats, then just doing this kind of scrubbing function on the fly would probably not be a big thing. But we're already looking at that very closely because we've heard it so many times. And I mean, to be honest, as a Final Cut user, I'd love to have it in there. It makes total sense.
It is. It's really once you have used it in other tools, it's kind of weird. It's not weird, but you just sort of miss it when you don't have it.
We also have checksum verified backup because some people, I mean, there are very good programs out there like Hedge, which is excellent software. But if you just need to check certain boxes and you say, okay, for your economics, this is another box that we check. You have secure media hash list offload in Kyno.
I don't think I knew that.
So it's in there, and if you as a small production company, especially these days, you have to look at your budget. I think the economics are really, really unbeatable if you compare it to other products that you would have to buy to get the same workflow efficiency, if that's possible, and buy those 3 or 4 products that you would need to replace that.
Gotcha. So Robert, quick rundown. What's the price of Kyno?
We have a standard version that costs $159, and there's a premium version that's $349.
What's the difference in those two?
The main difference, there are a number of differences. There are certain formats, like Red Raw, for example, that you would need the premium for. P2 card structure support as a typical premium feature. We have certain productivity functions, like, for example, metadata presets or pre-loading metadata, pre-configuring metadata on camera media that you can later automatically import into Kyno. Let me think. I think the Frame.io integration is also in the premium, and the Archiware integration.
So some of the higher end sort of things.
Typically, as a rule of thumb, we put stuff into the premium version that you typically need if you are in a TV environment, a broadcast environment, or larger enterprises. I think the package that we ship in the standard version, that's a professional piece of software that will probably cover the needs of a lot of people out there who make a living making video.
It does do it. But I was just checking on the website. In the premium, it's extended format support, more integrations, and advanced workflows, which I think you're right. The 159, the standard version does so much stuff. But talking about the price for a second, you've got, say, the standard version is 159 for a year of updates, and then another year updates for another year is 79. So it's not a subscription model, but explain the model, the pricing model there, because it's not a subscription.
No, it's if you buy Kyno, you can use it indefinitely without having to pay again. But after 1 year, you don't get any more updates. So this is we sort of try to find a balance. I mean, one thing, we have to invest a lot of effort updating codecs and adding new functionality, and that's something that we cannot afford if people don't pay for these updates at all. But of course, the subscription model it definitely has some disadvantages from the user's point of view that we really respect, and that's why we went with this model. We are also very liberal with update policies. So you can not update for 2 or 3 years, and after that, you don't have to buy a new license. You can update your existing one for an update price, which a lot of other companies don't do.
Yeah, and you get a number of updates throughout the year, so you guys are you're working on it, so which is great on a very regular basis. Robert, hey, thanks for joining us. Maybe next year at NAB we'll get to chat in person, and hopefully we'll all be back to normal back then. So Appreciate it. Stay safe where you are in Germany, and we look forward to more Kyno goodness coming out, in the near future.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm certainly looking forward to having a beer with you next year at NAB.
Great. Thanks a lot.